throughout my musical journey, the mentors and the teachers and the kind of musical inspirations and musical heroes have all been people that are pluralist, whether it's in classical spaces or non-classical spaces, right? Because pluralism can exist in any kind of genre space. But those have always been the things that have kind of, I think, appealed to me, especially like, not to make everything queer, but I think like, you know, I really gravitate to spaces that allow you to be fully yourself, which is something that's beautiful about like the queer community, right? It's really about radical individualism as a community.
Right.
And I think that's something that really appeals to me within music as well, is like just be as authentically yourself as possible, because that's the only thing you can do better than anyone else, right? Like, not that we have to be better than everyone else, but like there's only one thing on this planet that I can do better than every single person, and that is be me.
This is Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast from Loose Leaf Transmissions. Hey there, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the show. If you are new here, my name is Tyler, and I'm a composer, broadcaster, and producer who loves to make things, whether that's music or radio or podcasts like this. And I also love talking with creative people about how they make their work and what drives them to create. And if you have been listening for a while, well, welcome back. It's always great to have you. Today, I'm joined by composer and avant-folk vocalist Annika Socolofsky. Annika explores corners and colors of the voice, often labeled untrained or not classical, and her music erupts from the embodied power of singing, ranging from orchestral and operatic works to unaccompanied folk ballads and unapologetically joyous Dolly Parton covers. She's created a growing cycle of feminist rager-lullabies, including Don't Say a Word and I Tell You Me, reclaiming old texts for a new queer era. The latter was called Grotesquely Gorgeous by the Chicago Tribune and landed on their top 10 list of 2021. In our conversation, we trace the moments that shaped her voice, discovering composition in high school, a life-shifting encounter with the Silk Road Ensemble, and how collaboration became her antidote to the quote-unquote lone genius myth. We talk about making lowercase c music with play and joy, what it means to write for her own voice as an act of identity and activism, and how vulnerability sits at the center of her art. This is a really wonderful conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. It begins in just a moment. This show grows because of people like you, not some algorithm. So if something in today's conversation sparks something for you, the best way to support it is to follow the podcast and to share it with someone who'd get it too. You'll find links to subscribe, follow us on Instagram, or support on Patreon, all in the show notes or at looseleaftransmissions.com. Now, on to my conversation with Annika Socolofsky. Well, Annika, it's so great to sit down with you. You're someone who has been on my list of composers to talk to for quite some time now, and not to mention you're making some of my favorite music today. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what all we're able to dig into today, and just thanks so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah. So where we like to begin is as far back as you're willing to talk about and share, or as far back as you can remember. I guess whichever comes first. And that is, what is your earliest kind of artistic or creative memory as a composer?
Well, I don't know. This is probably not an uncommon experience for someone like growing up playing an orchestra or band, but like it never occurred to me that you could be alive and compose music, which obviously is like a requirement if you're going to be composing music, right? But I remember my high school orchestra director was so cool. He was like very young and very energetic and had all these great ideas. And the year before my senior year, he had instituted like this new rule that as a senior, you had to either conduct a piece with the orchestra, play a movement of a concerto, or compose a piece. And every senior picked conduct except for one, and she wrote a piece for her little brother. And I remember, like, it was just so cool. Like, I'd never played anything like it. It didn't kind of abide by any of the kind of quote unquote rules that I expected like classical music to abide by. And her little brother, he was like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old, and he was just so excited. He like ran up on stage afterward and gave her a big hug, and I was like, wow, I didn't know like our orchestra could affect people this way.
Yeah.
It was a really cool experience. And fast forward like a year, and well, actually, no, I take it back. It was later that year. Our orchestra director had taken us to see, and I grew up outside of Chicago. He took us to see the Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Ensemble with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Nice. And we all knew who Yo-Yo Ma was. We're orchestra geeks, but I didn't know what the Silk Road Ensemble was, and I didn't know what to expect. And my like back in that day, it was the day of like the iPod Shuffle. So like my iPod Shuffle was like the most like erratic mix of genres and styles and musical cultures. And I was listening to like Colombian vallenato and then like Scottish fiddle music and like no classical music, tons of Latino pop. And I showed up to the rehearsal and I was like, oh my God, this is like, they're playing music from all over the world. I didn't know you could do that as a classical musician. So that had a really big impact on me. And this comes to, I think, I don't know if I told you this or how you knew about the green-haired bagpiper, but this comes into that.
Yeah. Folks might have heard me mention this before on the podcast. Is I've with these recent episodes, I've introduced a questionnaire just so I can like pick up on anything that's impossible to find on the internet about guests like yourself. And yes, you mentioned a green-haired bagpiper, so I would love to know more.
Yeah. So I remember there was like, a break, bathroom break or whatever, and the musicians start coming back on stage, and there's this very tall woman with bright green long hair. She's wearing a pantsuit and carrying a briefcase as she like strutted up on stage and gave Yo-Yo Ma this huge hug, and they chatted for a bit, and she put her briefcase down and was like fiddling around in it. And I remember thinking like, who does she think she is, just waltzing up on stage? And I had no idea what she was doing on stage. I mean, she read as this like very eccentric businesswoman, and I couldn't see what was in her case or anything. And it wasn't any kind of shape that would reveal what was inside. And the conductor came back, everyone tuned, she turns around and she has bagpipes in her arms. And we all know what bagpipes sound like, or we think we do. And these were not that. They were not Scottish Highland bagpipes. They were Galician bagpipes. And they have a very like vocal timbre to them, still very bright and powerful, but like there's something very expressive about these particular genre of pipes. And I remember that she started to play with this like slow, raunchy timbral gliss, like timbre trill gliss, all the way up the entire length of her register. And the orchestra like tremoloed underneath, and then it went like straight into this like high octane dance. And I remember having like this series of rapid thoughts in succession. The first thought was, this isn't classical music. The second thought was, holy crap, this is classical music. Yeah. And then my third thought was like, I don't know if I'm straight. So it was like a really big kind of moment of revelation for me in many ways. And like I did not know that you could make classical music like that. It was such an eye-opening experience for me. I think one, to see my friend in orchestra compose a piece, and then to see like new music happening in a way that combines so many different cultures and experiences and musical styles and musical instruments. I just like, and that it could be in the realm of classical music, which was music I was already making. It was like I didn't know what to do with all this information at the time. I was like completely obsessed. I remember I couldn't go to the concert, but they had it streaming online for 90 days. And every single day I listened to the whole concert for 90 days. And the last day I tried to like do a loop back recording thing in Audacity and I couldn't figure it out and I gave up. But that piece ended up being Osvaldo Golihov's Rose of the Winds.
Mm.
And I became a huge fan of his music. And he's another person who kind of, there's a lot of facets to his identity in terms of musical cultures. And having, I think classical music at its best can be a place where you can bring every form of music making into that space and have it exist, coexist, have it cross pollinate, have it build into something new. I also think classical music at its worst can be really gatekeeping, right?
Sure, yeah.
And prevent those things. But like, so anyway, the end of this very long rambling story to your one question. I swear I'm not going to be this long-winded with my other answers.
Please do.
Is for my senior project, I composed a piece and I had no idea what I was doing, but I did it and it was hard and I loved everything about it. And I realized like, oh, this whole like transformative experience of hearing the Silk Road Ensemble and the bagpiper, her name is Christina Pato. I think this actually all that energy there has to do with becoming a composer. And I really loved writing this piece and like I've never felt this alive at school before. So I like quickly whipped together a portfolio and applied to music schools and got into one and went there
Yeah.
for music composition. And that was kind of the beginning of my attempt at becoming a composer.
I think this kind of thread that you're building off of with the Silk Road Ensemble specifically melding with classical music, and like classical music at its best can be this really I guess like genre inclusive thing. That's a kind of a thought that I want to put a pin into, because I think like this idea of genre fluidity is a big thing in your work. So I think it's interesting that like it all kind of started at that moment. And I should also add that like when music is made like that with intention, it's very different than like, putting a rock band with an orchestra and like, or putting like a jazz band with an and doing those kind of like pops things. So
they're definitely different. Yeah, I have heard some really fabulous like pop orchestral collabs, and I've also heard some not so fabulous ones. So yeah, I hear you. It's like all of my musical role models have been people who kind of, rather than trying to take a genre that's not classical and put it in a classical space, are just people who are kind of as genuinely and authentically and unabashedly channeling their musical identities and loves within the what I feel like is one of the few spaces that can really catch all, right? That
absolutely, yeah.
And Osvaldo Golihov is a good example of someone like that, I think. And the Silk Road Ensemble, of course, as well. Like,
yeah.
Especially under Rhiannon Giddens. Oh my God. I know the podcast shouldn't be about like how much I love the Silk Road Ensemble, but we could talk about that for like hours.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love going down any rabbit holes that might come up. So I do want to go kind of circle back though to this kind of senior project idea that you're talking about. I mean, first of all, that's the first I've ever heard of any like director of a high school ensemble doing something like that. I mean, there's plenty of stories, including my own, where it's like my high school band director really encouraged me to go after this thing. But it was just like kind of a me thing. Like he noticed like, oh, Tyler likes to do this. And then of course, like coming from the band world, there's like drum majors and marching bands. So like that's the conducting. So I'm like kind of interested in this whole idea of like, you can conduct the group, you can play with the group as a soloist, or you can compose for the group. I mean, one, I'm curious, like, where do you think that came from with that teacher? And two, what was that piece like for you? Was it like the Silk Road Ensemble, or was it something a little different?
Yeah, w- I mean, first of all, shout out to Mr. Green from Naperville North High School. Actually, he's now the director of the Chicago Youth Orchestra, I
Oh, that's
believe.
awesome.
Yeah, he's incredible. I mean, he's one of these teachers who just like is able to pull something out of you that you didn't know was there. And I think this assignment is such like, as a teacher myself now, like it's such a great lesson in like sometimes you need to like prompt people to step outside of their comfort zone, because beautiful things can happen when you're uncomfortable. And that project made me do that. And yeah, it was just so cool. And it was, oh gosh, that concert was so fun. Like I was not the only senior that year to write a piece. Like that
Mm,
became more and more of a thing. And one of my classmates went on to study, I think, songwriting in college. And like, yeah, it was just so cool to see people kind of just go for it as a senior. There's something really special and cool about that. The piece I wrote, it was, I wish I could say it sounded like the Silk Road Ensemble, but I
yeah.
was not that good of a composer yet. I will say, like, I knew the basics of music theory and that I knew how to read key signatures and play in different keys, but I couldn't tell you beyond like how to build the triad. I couldn't tell you how to use functional harmony. Not that one needs that in order to compose, of course, but like I was really feeling around in the dark. Like I was going by ear. I was trying things out on a keyboard for the first time in my entire life, and like trying to
Mm.
figure out how to use a keyboard because I thought that's how you were supposed to compose. And like it was a hot mess of a piece. I will say it was not a great piece, but there was some fun, groovy stuff with like knocking on your instruments and things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's one of those pieces you kind of um, look back on fondly and never speak of again. I think.
Yeah, I think we all have that.
Yeah. I think there's something beautiful though about those kind of like quote unquote failures though, where you just like really just go for it. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that personally I am like, I'm trying to get back to that kind of space these days. Like just go for it and fall flat on your face, because like
Mm,
beautiful things happen in that space, right? Even if the piece itself isn't quote unquote good, like you learn so much more from experiences like that than you would if you were trying to do something that you knew would be pretty or successful or appreciated. But anyway, I digress.
well, I mean, is so this project was your first composition? Is that right? I mean, what kind of tools were you given to succeed or not succeed?
um uh I mean, I was given no tools. I was
Just
just
write a
kind of like
piece.
go for it.
Yeah,
I think
interesting.
I'd like downloaded Finale or something. We had done a few like little engraving kind of projects in orchestra. So like I wasn't totally foreign to music notation. So I guess that was a tool. And then my orchestra director was like very happy to meet with me and
Okay, yeah.
like, you know, look at the piece. And for instance, I thought an English horn was a French horn because it said horn, and I was very surprised to learn that it is in fact not a brass instrument. So, there was some good support in that regard.
Yeah. Were you all playing a lot of I mean, I'm thinking, high school band is different than high school orchestra. I always remember our high school orchestra playing, like the music of all the dead white guys, right? And
Yeah,
the band mostly played all the music of like living white guys, but at any rate,
yeah.
it always kind of seemed to me that like for better or worse, like the wind band repertoire was a lot fresher than like what the orchestra
Totally.
was playing. So with the idea that like he's asking students to compose if they want to, I mean, were you playing new music at all?
I mean, a little. There was some like, new music for band is much more sophisticated and deep in terms of like people making it than new music for say like string orchestra. So, um we weren't playing a ton of new music, and if it was like, a cute kind of pirate sounding arrangement or
Yeah.
something with a seagull effect in the cellos, which was lovely and we enjoyed very much. But our director did kind of branch us out a bit. He had us playing like a little bit of like tango or bossa nova, or like it wasn't all classical, I will say, which was really, really cool. And I really appreciated that about him. But we also did play a lot of dead white guys as well.
Yeah. Sure.
And I mean, I think that's a lot, almost everyone's experience growing up, especially until you get like to the high school level. Like, you only hear about like in general music education. I remember like up on the wall above the chalkboard, there were like drawings of like Bach and Beethoven and Mozart's busts, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a composer. That's what they are. And I mean, I think that experience is pretty standard.
Yeah. So with that said, I mean, you mentioned you knew of a composer because of like a classmate a year ahead of you writing a piece for the orchestra. But
Yeah.
I guess besides that, and besides your Silk Road experience, I mean, when was your first encounter with a living professional composer?
I took a 1 week summer course after my senior year of high school, with a really cool guy named Seth Bosted, who is based in Chicago/New York. And I met Stacy Garrop for like a 1 hour lesson when I was 18. Pretty sure she does not remember that. So I had like met a few people, and then actually Osvaldo Golihov was in Chicago because he was composer in residence at the Chicago Symphony back then. And I got to meet him and was like totally starstruck
Yeah.
because he just his piece had changed my life, and he was very sweet and uh human, and all these composers just felt like so human. I thought that was really beautiful, like they're just excited that someone young was interested in being a part of the same field. Like I just felt very welcoming and supportive with all these people. So it made it feel very real, I think. Like, okay, like maybe I could write more music, which is a great feeling to have. And again, not the experience that people have when starting out. But I think it's then going to college, of course, my
Yeah.
teachers were were similarly very kind and welcoming. So it what's funny is like, I guess to bring this full circle, is like I had this impression of classical music as being like the dead white male European composers, right? And then my first dose of like actually feeling welcome in that space all came from people who were kind of way outside of that
Mm.
kind of music making. And we're young and alive and welcoming and enthusiastic and making music that is blending genres. And I was like, oh, okay, so my conception of classical music, or at least contemporary classical music, is completely wrong. And I was very happy to discover that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this whole podcast is about your life as a composer, but I know you're also a singer. So I mean, I'm curious, like as a singer, I imagine like you probably were maybe in choir throughout high school and stuff, but maybe not, and maybe like can you kind of like how does that fit into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think I was in like fifth grade choir. That
Okay,
was
yeah.
it. I did have to sing in choir in college. Like they made you be part of an ensemble, and in full transparency, I was not good enough for the orchestra. So I joined the choir, and I really enjoyed it. But I like never identified as a singer or ever thought I would be one. It wasn't until I was working on my master's at the University of Michigan, and I had written a piece for a friend who's a incredible folk singer. I used to play in like an Eastern European or pan Eastern European folk ensemble with her, and she could sing in like 12 different languages. It's crazy. Still can't. I shouldn't talk about her in the past tense. And I had written this song cycle with her in mind that kind of was similar in many ways to the kind of music that we had been making together previously in a band. I had been playing fiddle and accordion, and she had been singing. There were a bunch of other people, but she was in nursing school at the time, and she kept having to cancel whenever we
Mm,
planned to have her come up to Michigan to perform it. And meanwhile, in lessons, my composition teacher, Evan Chambers, had been hearing me sing the piece in lessons because he'd be like, "Oh, I don't really know what that is going to sound like, or I don't know what that language, I don't know what those words sound like. Can you sing them for me?" And I would. And I remember early on, he said, "I think you should be the one to sing this piece." And I'm pretty sure I laughed in his face.
yeah.
It was like, absolutely not. Terrible idea. Thank you. Moving on. And as like this kept happening with the singer not being able to come, he was kind of like, "So, remember when I suggested this?" And he laughed in my face, like, "Will you consider it for real now?" And I ended up just going for it and doing it and performing it. And I mean, I talked earlier about like being at the Silk Road Ensemble rehearsal and like feeling so alive. And performing this piece is very, very emotional, visceral piece. It involved like, I'll tell you what, when you get up in front of an audience and you like scream at the top of your lungs, it's like you can't hide. There's nowhere
Yeah.
to hide, right? And it's just like I felt so alive, and I felt like, wow, like not only am I writing this music, but I get to literally make it with people. And like, there's no way I could have done that alone, but to have a group of people up there with me performing that piece, it was like, yeah, it was life changing. And I realized, wow, I think I'm going to have to do this again. Like, that was like, forget skydiving. Like, that was the epitome of an adrenaline rush, but also like, fun, and not just the adrenaline, but like fun and communal. And I was totally hooked. So that came later. I think I was 23 when I sang kind of as soloist for the first time. And I didn't have any kind of like training in vocal technique or anything at that point. I was just kind of doing my thing, and I took a lot of voice lessons since then. I'm not sure I'm a better singer as a result because they're voice lessons and like singing classically, and I
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah. Which I appreciate,
um
by the way.
well, thank you. I mean, it's like my vocal style is similar to kind of my musical loves, like, or
Yeah.
what we're talking about the Silk Road Ensemble. I like to think that like my voice is an embodiment of like all these different genres that I grew up loving or music I grew up making, and that those kind of things come out in my voice compositionally, but also my like metaphorical compositional voice as well. Cool.
Well, you did mention like you were playing in this band with somebody, which I guess is like kind of the connection I was trying to make.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we're kind of talking. I don't know. People say like capital C composer, and then like I
Mm.
guess like lower case C. I don't know. I don't even know what that means. But like when people say it,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we all know what we're saying.
Yeah.
Neither is better than the other, but at any rate, I mean, we're talking about like you. you composed for the orchestra in high school, you put the portfolio together, you went to school to study composition. And I guess what I'm curious about is, were there other avenues of music making you were doing all throughout that
Oh
time?
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I remember one of my classmates in undergrad. I went to Carnegie Mellon. My classmate Rob Brandazzo saw, also a composition major, saw a flyer for like the Carnegie Mellon klezmer band, like come and
Oh,
join.
yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, that's gonna be really cool. Let's go." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what klezmer is, but sure." And I just got completely hooked. And I started studying Yiddish. I took lessons in Yiddish song. I fell off the deep end and I went to like 6 or 7 klez Canadas, which are like this beautiful mountain klezmer artist retreat up in Quebec, and like yeah, that was amazing. And I was also playing in the University of Pittsburgh Carpathian Ensemble, which is where I met my friend Elizabeth, who I was trying to write a song cycle for, and then I started one of my other friends, composition major at Carnegie Mellon, Christine Hedden, was an incredible Irish fiddler. So she started teaching me tunes. And I was born in Scotland. So I got really interested in Scottish tunes and grew up listening to it, but had never really played it. So I started playing Scottish fiddle in a band with her, and Carnegie Mellon has bagpipe majors. So
That's awesome.
it's like one of only 2 schools in the US to have a bagpipe degree program. So I was like in a band with those folks, and like just kind of totally geeking out in every direction I possibly could. And it was like the kind of fun I was having in those groups. I mean, when you're in a band, it's not versus like an orchestra. I feel like they're your friends, right? It's community in a way that it's hard to achieve in some of those bigger ensembles. And I kept kind of everywhere I moved and lived, I kept kind of seeking these things out, whether it was playing for contra dances or, making new bands and writing new tunes for them or what. A lot of it was fiddling, but some of it was singing and accordion, and those kind of spaces are just so playful and low stakes. I think that's something, back to the capital C composer thing. Like a lot of the formal study feels like it's really high stakes. Like you have to be
Yeah.
writing your best music all the time.
Right.
And I would like hold myself to these ridiculous, impossible standards of perfectionism in those spaces. And then I'd go like play tunes and get to make music in ways that weren't capital C kind of music making, capital M, I don't know. And uh, I've been trying to, in my compositional practice over the years, move towards maybe more of a lowercase c
Yeah, sure.
practice, and kind of take myself a little less seriously, which has been nice. It's like, music doesn't have to be high stakes. And I'm always trying to teach my students that as well. Like, what if you went home and wrote like the worst piece you could possibly write, and bring it back? And invariably they bring in something that's like awesome, right? But because they've given themselves permission to be bad, suddenly, they unleash something new. And I'm trying to do that a little bit, I think, within my own music these days.
Yeah, that pressure, I know exactly what you're talking about from personal experience, but also in,
Hmm.
talking with other composers. And I was talking to one composer who I know, the imposter syndrome might kick in,
Oh
and like the
yeah.
perfectionism and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, it's going to be bad. And like, it kind of keeps people from finishing work to a certain point.
Oh my
And,
god,
and I'm
yeah.
like, I think you would have to like try even harder to write a bad piece than,
Yeah.
than like the effort it's taking for you to try to write a good piece. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like we're all kind of at a point where it's like, some of that stuff we don't have to think about anymore. It's like
Yeah,
it'll be fine.
totally. It's like yeah, we all feel imposter syndrome, right? Like there's no way anyone who says they don't is lying or
Yeah.
just like isn't honest with themselves maybe, but yeah, like it's so hard. It's really really hard, especially for like I feel like young composers. It's a really hard field to like get that first commission in, right? Like it can feel really I think, overwhelming and lonely, especially because we're doing our practice alone, right? The way capital C composition is taught is like you're alone in your room making music by yourself, and then you hand it over to the ensemble when you're done with it. And like, I think that's another aspect of capital C composing that I'm trying to move away from. It's not fun anymore. I think the pandemic made me just so sick of my own brain that I'm like, get me out of here. I'll make music in any other way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel you. The imposter syndrome thing is real, and I think it never goes away. Or at least from my experience, it hasn't gone away. But now I'm kind of like, oh, there it is. There's the imposter syndrome. I can kind of wave at it and put it over in the corner and keep moving.
Yeah, totally. So you're kind of hinting at these like shifts, I guess you could say, in your thinking about your work and stuff. So I guess I'm curious
Mm,
with that in mind. Can you share a bit of an overview, like connect the dots of what you've talked about so far and where you've ended up in your creative journey? I mean, do you feel like it followed a more conventional path, whatever that might mean to you?
yeah.
Or were there any kind of unexpected twists or surprises, along the way?
Oh, that's such a good question. You're really like helping me organize my rambling here, so I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I did actually follow the most conventional path. Like all my degrees are in music composition. And like, I studied composition in a very formal way, but also like the people that I sought out throughout my education were people who were like very much not the convention in many
Mm,
ways, or we're all people who are kind of people that I would consider like Silk Road adjacent kind of composers, like Ray Zavali, Evan Chambers, Dan Truman, Donica Dennehy. These are all people who are like creating music as composer performers, many of them, but also as people whose musical loves and identities exist outside of purely classical music, and in a lot of different folk traditions. But I do feel like I kind of ended up in classical music by mistake. Like I'm not here because I like love classical music. Like I never listened to classical music. I my iPhone is just like full of like 70s and 80s country and Irish
nice.
and Scottish fiddle tunes and klezmer and like Egyptian pop and stuff. So it's kind of it's all over the place. But the people who have kind of helped me find my way, I would say, have been the people who are, I guess, kind of lighting the way in terms of like embracing their musical loves and identities in classical spaces. I don't know if that's making sense or if I'm coherently tying together the timeline here.
No, no, no. As it does make sense, and I mean, what I'm hearing is like you followed a conventional path, but you were under the guidance of people who thought outside of that convention.
Yes. Yeah, and actually, Reza Vali, who was the reason I even applied to Carnegie Mellon. He was my teacher there for 3 years, and he has such a fascinating story in terms of his musical life. Like, he grew up in Tehran playing trombone and learning Western classical music, and then he went to Vienna to study and was prescribed an aesthetic, essentially a
Mm,
very European modernist aesthetic, and then went to the US to do his doctorate and was finally kind of able to explore a little more in terms of his musical voice. But he had a moment actually around the time I was studying with him. He was realizing, like, why do I play trombone and piano and teach Debussy? Like, I'm from Iran, and the music that I love and listen to and wrenches my heart is like, yeah, I love Debussy, but like, I really love Persian folk music, and I really want to learn more about the Daska system. And so he started studying Santur and really exploring in even greater depth he'd already been writing in a very what he calls pluralist style, but he just kind of he actually retired so that he could from teaching so that he could kind of devote his whole life to learning more about Persian music and becoming better at performing it and pushing his compositional voice in new ways. And he wrote a lovely book about what he calls pluralism, which is like we don't have to kind of filter or deny any aspect of our musical identities and our musical loves and our music in classical spaces. And that's something that really resonates with me as well, as something that and I love that word pluralism because it kind of it allows things to coexist and intermingle
Yeah.
rather than like the word influences is like gross. It implies there's like a dominant style or somehow classical music is dominant. Like what is even classical music? Right, like Western classical music, there is no sound or style to it, which is what's so great about it. Other than I think maybe the one thing that connects it together are the performers, right? Because they're trained in a very specific way. But yeah, that I have always gravitated toward people, and I didn't have the language for this at the time, but throughout my musical journey, the mentors and the teachers and the kind of musical inspirations and musical heroes have all been people that are pluralist, whether it's in classical spaces or non-classical spaces, right? Because pluralism can exist in any kind of genre space. But those have always been the things that have kind of, I think, appealed to me, especially like not to make everything queer, but I think like, you know, I really gravitate to spaces that allow you to be fully yourself, which is something that's beautiful about like the queer community, right? It's really about radical individualism as a
Mm,
community.
right.
And I think that's something that really appeals to me within music as well, is like just be as authentically yourself as possible because that's the only thing you can do better than anyone else, right? Like not that we have to be better than everyone else, but like there's only one thing on this planet that I can do better than every single person, and that is be me. And same for everyone else, right? And I want to live in a world where everyone can be exactly who they are and make the kind of music that reflects exactly who they are. And we don't live in that kind of world. but but classical music at its best is sometimes capable of that, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. When did you know that you wanted to pursue your craft as a career, or maybe even felt like you could pursue it as a career?
Hmm. I think I knew I wanted to like shortly after going to that Silk Road rehearsal. Actually, I remember sitting in my room staring at the program pinned to my wall and thinking like, what if that was my life? And just getting so giddy. But I don't think I realized how that was actually possible. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I knew I wanted it, but I also in college I also studied chemistry and was very convinced that I was going to go down a practical route. And
Mm,
at a certain point I remember being in chem lab my senior year, walking in, smelling acetone and all the awful smelling things you smell coming out of a lab hood, and just getting so sick to my stomach because I realized that every second I spent in that lab was time I could not spend on music. And that was like, it was really hard. It's not like I just knew that I wasn't going to do chemistry, but it was like such a visceral, full body reaction. I remember I like closed down my hood, walked out of the lab, and went straight down to the advising office and was like, do I have to take this class? And she was like, unfortunately, you do.
yeah,
But I think that was the moment that I was like, yeah, no, this is it. Like music is it, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I don't know how. I don't know if that's even possible, but I have to try because if I don't try, I will have this sick, nauseous feeling in my stomach like I do right now for the rest of my life. I just got to try.
yeah. Not to mention when you're staring at that program from the Silk Road concert and you're like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know how, but I know I need to. Like, that's
Hmm.
also one of those things like, there's no instruction manual for that. Like there's an instruction manual more or less for like, okay, how do I get a job teaching composition in academia? That's like a very like that's a laid out, like everybody does it basically.
Yep.
But it's like that more like niche, I guess, for lack of a better word, sorts of and also more compelling work that is possible in our field. I mean, it's like you
Mm-hmm.
pretty much just have to like in some ways it's a lonely path, but in other ways it's like, you got to carve that path yourself. And then,
Totally.
you know,
Yeah. It's like, you could ask, you could survey 200 composers and ask what their path was to their career, and you'd have 200 different answers, right? And it's both terrifying because it's so unknown, but it's also so beautiful because of course it's that way. Because that's what artists are, right? We're radical individuals.
mm,
So of course our paths to our career are going to reflect our radical differences, and I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's scary for me now. Right, like it was really scary for me in my 20s, but now that I'm in my mid 30s, it's still like, what's next? I don't know. It's kind of, free will is a little intimidating sometimes.
yeah. Oh yeah. I know how easy it is to hear a mid roll just like this one and tune out completely. I do it too. Actually, I even skip through them sometimes. But if you've been enjoying this episode and you're still with me here, this is a great moment to hit follow, leave a quick rating, or just tell a friend. All of those actions really do matter, and you can find links in the show notes, or you can visit looseleaftransmissions.com to do all of those things and more. So, you've said that all of your musical loves really come from folk and folk adjacent genres, and you mentioned a little bit earlier that it kind of feels like an accident that you ended up in classical music at all. And I got to say that it really resonates with me hearing you say that like you don't listen to any classical music. In fact, my day job is in classical music radio, which I've been able to carve out like my modern music program. But then outside of that, I'm still hosting like Beethoven and Mozart. I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
like the classical music or whatever. And
Yeah.
we had a consultant come in. I hope it's okay for me to tell this story. I should be, whatever.
Yeah, no, this is great.
We had a consultant come in recently, and we're meeting one on one with him, and he's trying to like get a feel for like who we are and what the station's all about. And he's like, "Do you ever listen to the station, in your free time?" And I was just like, was immediately emphatically, I was like, "No." And then I like paused and I was like, "Oh no, was I not supposed to say that?" Well, and it's like, it's not because like I don't believe in what we do. It's like,
Yeah.
I just, there's, this is my job. And then there's like the music that I love to listen to. So,
Yeah.
at any rate, like I loved hearing you say that. But when did it start to feel like classical music was a place where you could actually like hold all of these different things that you love all at once?
Well, I think for most people that would probably come later, but I actually think that was like the only reason I even thought I could become a composer was because I had that experience early on where I saw that it was possible. Because like I mentioned the Osvaldo Golihov piece, but like that program they were rehearsing, it had Osvaldo Golihov on it. It had a Zhu Long piece with there was the Lou Harrison Peacock concerto. There was like the breadth of styles within that program was just incredible. So like to see them all share the same space, the same concert hall, the same musicians, I think was kind of a very clear message like, yeah, music making can be radically inclusive.
Yeah.
And that's a really weird first kind of major message to get, I think. But I'm really grateful for that. So I think I kind of I went into like new music making from that perspective, and then was rudely surprised to see that some people didn't feel that way.
Oh yeah.
And I like every single time someone expressed something to the contrary, I was like, what? No, you're wrong. Which I'm thankful that I'm so stubborn, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that are trying to gatekeep and kind of dictate aesthetics or dictate modes of music making or forms of notation, or so I think I was really, really lucky that kind of my entry point was one of like radical stylistic inclusion.
Yeah.
And then I've just spent like the rest of my adult life trying to fight for those kind of spaces, I think, for myself but also for other people, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hearing you earlier say like you listen to like 70s and 80s countries. I mean, I
Hmm.
probably like yourself. I grew up listening to like my parents are not classically trained musicians. They're actually
Yeah,
not musicians at all, and they
mine
so
either.
I grew up around like they loved all kind like classic rock, 70s 80s rock,
Yeah.
and like 90s country music is something that's like re-entering my life. Like we were
Oh,
out at a
nice.
bar in Cincinnati. We went to a new bar last year, and it became my favorite one because we popped in on Saloon Saturday on accident. And it's it's like a hipster dive bar, but they were just playing all this '90s country music that I love,
uh
and I bring that up to say, it dawned on me at a certain point in undergrad. It's like I don't know if like I don't remember why this came up. I'm guessing like you said, there were people around me kind of like talking down about different kinds of music, and I realized like there is no good or bad music. Like I could have the same emotional reaction to like a Mahler symphony as my mom might have to like a Brooks and Dunn song. You know what I mean?
yeah, of
And
course.
I've tried to like hold on to that thought like through thick and thin. Of course, now I do think like if you're teaching and like there's like an objective craft component, good or bad, to music perhaps, but the subjective nature of it all. I mean, it's um, yeah, it's so bogus when I hear people like talking down about different kinds of music, like one's better than the other, because it's really not.
Totally.
It's not.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned teaching, because I think that teachers can kind of unintentionally send some of those messages as well, right? And so whenever I teach a piece or tell a student to go listen to a piece that they haven't heard before, I always say, you don't have to like it. Like, actually,
Yeah.
if you hate it, that's great. Come back and tell me all the ways you hate this piece, because like we learn a lot from music we don't like. And I'm always trying. I say I don't listen to classical music. I should say I listen to music by my friends, which are
Oh, well, yeah.
classical, like contemporary classical music. I listen to that, but like I love listening to stuff that just like completely rubs me the wrong way, because you learn so much about your tastes, but also sometimes there'd be like a piece that you just like really don't like, but there's just this one moment where like there's I don't know, I'm not going to name the piece or the composer, because I actually really love this composer, but there's this piece that I don't really care for of theirs. But there's this one moment, it's like a very sine tony clarinet with flutter tongue flute at like at pitch doubling at the same time, and that with these like really subtle little swells in the flute. I'm like, oh my god, like that is so cool.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
And I think about it like once a week. I've thought about it once a week for like a decade, that one sound. And I didn't care for the piece, but it's like, who cares, if I like it, right? No, I mean, not to go all Milton Babbitt on us here, but um but it's like, i've had I've had teachers try to tell me like, oh, you really should spend time with the Mahler symphonies. They're like so important. You'll learn so much about craft, but they don't tell me what I'm supposed to learn from it. And I
Yeah,
go listen to it
yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, this is a swing and a miss, which is fine. Like, I love that you love him, but for me, I couldn't care less. And I think that just kind of, yeah, I don't know, maybe it's this it's there's this culture in classical music of like treating pieces as like precious
Yeah.
precious stones or something, like it's untouchable. Like, how dare you insult like this perfect little like crystal of a piece. And um I think it's fine to just not like things, and I try to like encourage my students to share that and not take like, not that I want them like bashing each other's music, but like,
Yeah.
if you know that it's okay, I'm totally totally devolving here, but like if I know conceptually it's okay for me to not like things, then I will not take it as personally if someone else does not like what I've made, right? It's like, yeah, if you just don't have to like everything, that's fine. It's not that you failed as a composer. It's not that you're not a good composer. It's just like, we're all different people with different tastes, and that's cool. Anyway, I digress.
Well, and I have to add on to that my favorite phenomenon. I don't have a chance to work with students a lot, so I'm mostly speaking from my own experience
Mhm.
here, about myself. But my favorite phenomenon is like this: like you hear a piece and it's like, oh, I really don't like that, and then you like, you spend time with it, and then it's like you eventually fall in love with it, or like for the same reasons you like you fall out of love with music that you once loved, and that's like a
Oh my
really
god, yeah.
interesting thing to me too.
Oh, totally. I actually I hated Dolly Parton as a kid. I thought she was like this I didn't understand caricature, and I was like, "You represent everything about femininity that I hate." And like and your voice is so girly, and like I hate it. And as an adult, she's like my favorite artist, like my number one favorite artist. And it's like because I understand more, how what her approach to feminism is and how she's using the power she was given to its greatest effect. And it's like, it's so cool. I think I agree that we can change and evolve as people and learn
Yeah.
things and hear things so differently. It's like that's really exciting. I haven't fallen out of love with much yet though, so I'm kind of excited for that to happen too now that you mention it.
Yeah, nothing comes to my mind specifically, but I know that like there's just music that I don't listen to anymore, and I feel like if I go back and listen to it, I'm like, I remember being excited about this, but why?
Yeah.
Like that kind of. I'm actually glad that you brought up Dolly Parton because I was going to ask you like examples of how you like might uh kind of integrate all these different kinds of musics into
Mm.
your creative life, and I seem to remember something about like you did research on Dolly Parton at one point, or am I thinking of
Yeah, I
if
wrote
I'm
my dissertation on her. Yeah.
yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I can talk about it. Yeah, I mean, Dolly is someone who, I mean, talk about like like she's someone who fits pretty squarely inside of a genre because she was kind of one of the figureheads of it. I think. I don't want to like. I should country music is a really complex history and origin story rooted in like black american music, so like a lot of thinking about like the country artists who quote unquote define the genre, I want to be really careful about like crediting her overly crediting her. But she is a huge person, so like in the genre, so to call her pluralist in style maybe is counterintuitive, but she does transcend a lot of styles of pop and country. She was one of the first artists to really do pop country crossover and bridge genres, but she also like the range of techniques she uses in her voice is just like immense. And there are two singers in my life that have kind of radically affected the way I think about the voice. Dolly is one of them, and the other one is an incredible Greek singer, Savina Yanatou. And both of them, like the kind of musical pluralism that just exists in their body and their voice is immense. And it means that there's so many different colors and inflections and qualities to their voice that they use to tell their stories. And I mean, country is really about storytelling, so it makes sense
Right.
that Dolly would do this, right? But like, there's so much nuance to the way she will paint a phrase in terms of timbre and in terms of inflection, and it's like you can just zoom in and zoom in and zoom in on a phrase, and it's just like it's like a fractal, it's just like limitless detail in there. And I just find that like thrilling. So that, yeah, Dolly does that, Savina Yanatu does that, and I try to do that in my own voice and kind of draw upon the musical loves, get them in my body, get like learn to sing them, learn to feel them, uh, have that muscle memory there. and then forget about all of it and just sing and kind of let my body do the thinking in a way. That's really fun. It's another way of kind of avoiding the classical C composer mentality, I think. I think
Yeah.
like, this whole discussion actually comes back to like, how am I just avoiding capital C composer mentality? But
No, I love it.
yeah.
I mean, hearing you speak about these voices in this way, these non-classical voices, I'll add. I mean,
Hmm.
does that change the way you think about like just the music you write, the non-vocal music that you write?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. I I remember when I was in choir in college, our choir director, his name's Bob Page, may he rest in peace. He said he can always tell when a composer didn't sing through their lines while they were writing them because they just didn't breathe. The phrasing wasn't natural. And I remember he said that in class, and I was like, oh, I've never sung through a line in my life that I've written. And so I try to approach everything that I compose, be it for instruments, voices, whatever, electronics, of having that kind of like carbon based life form phrasing to it, as opposed to like silicon based, which is, I guess, what our computers are made out of or whatever. Because I think there's a kind of naturalness. When I was a kid, I really wanted to play saxophone, but I ended up playing violin. Long story, not very good story. But well, actually, it's kind of funny. I remember they said you had to play clarinet for a year and then you could play the
Oh,
saxophone. And
yeah.
I remember thinking, clarinet is the worst instrument. I will not be playing clarinet. I'm going to go
Yeah.
play the violin. It's just hilarious because I love the clarinet now. But
Yeah.
I love the saxophone because I loved like all these like 90s sax solos, with these soaring vocal lines. And I had that kind of breath envy. I wanted to be able to phrase things that way. So it made sense that I became a singer, actually, because I finally like a lot of saxophonists are always talking about how they're imitating vocalists. And I'm like, I just skipped the saxophone and went to the voice. But yeah, I try to approach everything that I write as really embodying the phrase for each and every musician. I'm not always successful. I don't always sing through everything, but I try to at least conduct through it, or like, like almost like dance through it in a way, not in like a grand, like I'm a terrible dancer, but like literally just feel it in my
Yeah.
body, or imagine it in my body. If I were a clarinetist, how would I feel playing this phrase?
Mm.
Hoping that then makes music that feels good to play, right?
Yeah, totally. I'd love to talk about your piece Turadh, which I've
Mm-hmm.
really fallen in love with. I've played it like a bunch on the radio show,
Oh,
and
thanks.
and the program. I think part of why I mean it's good music, but also you tell this story in the program notes about how you played fiddle for your grandmother and great aunt
Hmm.
in Kansas, and rather than me tell that story, I mean, could you talk about how those personal memories made their way into this piece specifically, and how you approached
Hmm.
building something that carries that kind of warmth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wrote that piece. It was like the first piece I wrote after acquiring my Hardanger d'Amore, which is this unbelievable instrument. Dan Truman, my teacher at Princeton, was the person who first created one of these, and this is actually the reason I went to Princeton to study with him. He created this instrument. Hardanger is a traditional Norwegian instrument. It's got just like a violin, strings that you play with a bow and you put your fingers down on them, but it's got strings that run underneath the fingerboard that you never play, and they just ring sympathetically.
Oh yeah,
So it's kind of like a BYO reverb situation. It's a really cool sound. It's very stunning, and Dan kind of dreamt up a bigger, louder version with even more strings. It's even more warm and more resonant. And I had heard him play, like, he has this incredible album with Caoimhín O'Reilly, a fabulous Irish fiddler. And I remember when I got into Princeton, I wasn't entirely convinced I wanted to go there. And Dan let me play his fiddle. he was like, "Have you ever played with Hardanger d'Amore before?" I was like, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Okay, well, I have to go. So I'll just unpack this and leave it in my office. The door will lock behind you." Just like such a power move.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think I stood there for like 5 minutes just staring at it because I knew, like, if I play this instrument, I'm going to have to come here. Like, I'm not going to be able to not come here. But if I don't play this instrument, I can just walk away back to my lovely life in Michigan and like not have to move across the country and do scary things. I played the instrument. It was unbelievable. I remember I was in like this small office with like, you know, foam ceiling tiles, like no reverb to speak of. And I just played an arpeggio and instantly like looked up and around me like, where is this reverb coming from? It feels like I'm in a cathedral, right? It
Yeah.
was unbelievable. And like, I don't know if you've ever played a violin, but like a regular violin is actually a really intense like sensory experience. Like it vibrates through your jaw and it's like really loud. It's kind of like having your teeth gently drilled. Like it's an intense experience physically. And this was more like having it under your chin. It was like a warm shower, just like
Oh,
gently
yeah.
caressing your jaw. Like it's just like such an incredible sensory experience. And I might like, anyway, I got on the wait list. I went to Princeton. I got on the wait list for one of these fiddles because at the time there's only one guy in southern Norway making these. I think I have number 21. There's probably like at least 100 in the world now. And I was just like, I fell back in love with fiddling, playing this instrument. I brought it with me to Kansas to visit my grandma and my great aunt, who both had dementia. They're identical twins. And they lived in the same nursing home. And oftentimes for people with dementia, like conversation can be really hard because they don't remember what we've already talked about. But like playing music for them was just like, it made everything so easy. Like they could just sit there and be present and didn't have to worry about whether or not they remembered something, you know. And there's so much warmth in this like fiddle, in this Hardanger d'Amore. It just like filled these tiny, you know, muffled rooms of their nursing home with like so much sound, so much warmth, and it felt like a way that like one of the few ways left I had to really connect with them. So I loved bringing it with me. I loved playing it for them every time I visited. And they'd always ask, like, did you bring your fiddle? I'm like, you remember that I have a
Yeah.
fiddle. So like, this is really great. And my grandmother and my great aunt passed away within a year of each other around the time I wrote this piece. So the piece is kind of about just sharing that warmth and connecting with your people. My grandmother used to, if she forgot what the conversation was about, she would look out the window at the sky, which is normally gray, and say something like, well, it's another gray day in the Midlands. So that was kind of like this kind of dark, stormy quality was something that I was thinking about in writing the piece. And the name of the piece, Turadh, means like a break in the clouds. Like this, the sun shines through. So it was kind of a little bit of a love letter to, they both feel like my grandmothers because they're identical twins. It's like two for the price of one. So it's like kind of a love letter to my grandmothers in that way.
Well, and just hearing you describe playing this instrument in like a nursing home room, I think most of us have experienced being in that setting. And you're right. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, necessarily, it's like usually sterile. It's, linoleum floors, drop ceiling. It's, if we're thinking
Yep.
about it as sound people, it's like dead, it's dry.
Yeah.
Dead's not a great word to use. I'm sorry
No,
for saying
but no,
but
but actually, because I almost use that word too. I think that's kind of spot on, right? There's something dead about nursing homes, and
yeah.
they don't need to be that way, right? They can be full of life, and I think, yeah, that was something it very much felt like. Even though I knew their years were limited, to be able to be present with them in that way did feel like, a moment full of life, and that was really meaningful.
Well, and where it might be difficult to, transport them to a concert hall, for example, it sounds like you were able to kind of bring that experience to them with this instrument.
A little bit, yeah, I guess so. It was the other thing about this instrument is like unlike a violin where you tune it typically in fifths, you can tune this instrument as geared pegs. You often tune to a key. And
Mm,
then if you let the instrument sit in that key for a few hours, few days, it really locks into this resonance that like is unbelievable. And so like I think to be able to kind of just sit in that, like, to not there's something really cool that happened when I started playing this instrument, which is that everything I used to love, like, ripping fast Scottish reels, like, the Scots love their syncopated new tunes, like, they're super groovy, they're loads of fun, super high energy, and then I got this instrument and my playing slowed down, like, astronomically
yeah.
because there's no need to rush. It's just such you're like the sound of a single note is enough on this instrument. Like I just felt like that was like it allowed me to be so present in my playing and to give my playing so much space. And I think that also in that setting of like we're just sitting here and being present with each other, right? Um doesn't matter if you remember what I played a minute ago, right? We're
Right.
just sitting here in this moment and not trying to be impressive, just like feeling things together. It was really nice. I hope it was meaningful for them too. It was very meaningful for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this piece, Turadh, it's not necessarily written for the Hardanger fiddle. It's like an ensemble with like a fixed media that is, or maybe electronics of some kind that samples the fiddle.
Mhm.
And so, I'm just kind of curious, more broadly. I mean, this could be for this piece, or hearing that this kind of coincides with you starting like a PhD. I'm sure that that kind of transformed your musical thinking in some way as well. So, how has playing that instrument opened up new ways of hearing and composing for you?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it definitely got me on a spectral bandwagon, I'll tell you that much. Like, it's, because you hear things you never heard before when you're playing that instrument. Like, there is so much richness to the sonority. You start hearing these overtones, and you're like, "Wow, I didn't realize those overtones existed." Right? Because of course they existed. Like, if you play an A, the overtones are there, right? On any instrument, but like I just completely I became much more timbrally sensitive because of that. And the way I was approaching like voicing chords was less concerned about like does this sound full enough and more concerned of like I think more fine tuned to like the types of resonances I wanted to be entering the space, how I was gluing ensemble members together in vertical space, and trying to blend sounds. That's something I was really concerned with in Turadh. And I just like yeah, I think there's a sensitivity to my verticality that I didn't have before, especially like as a vocalist and a fiddler, those are single line instruments. So like I was really thinking melodically and really thinking linearly and about pacing and how everything connected and pulled us through time, but I wasn't satisfied with just sitting in a sound.
Yeah.
And that the instrument definitely allowed me to do that, and it helped my voice a lot too, I think, because, like, it's really hard to be comfortable with, like I don't know, if you I mentioned, like, a single note on this instrument is enough, right? That's really uncomfortable. That's really an exposed thing to do is, like, play a note or 2 notes and just sit in the resonance of that, and to think, like, this is worthy of being on stage.
Mm,
But if
yeah.
you can get to a place like that, I mean, even within your own voice, it's like, yeah, no, I don't have to be trying 110% to make my voice sound really like convincing or powerful. Like it can be delicate, it can be fragile, it can be imperfect, and that can be really kind of beautiful, like having those the fragility and imperfections. So I think it kind of as a result, my music not only felt more comfortable vertically, but also kind of felt more comfortable being fragile, being something that wasn't forceful. Because I talked about how stubborn I was and how good I was at deflecting people who were saying things that weren't inclusive in our field, but that's not always true, right? And there's this idea that you have to write somehow music that is like academically justifiable or like complex, or like, especially as a woman, like if you write dainty music, then people are like, well, that's a woman writing dainty music. But if a man writes dainty music, it's like, wow, how brave, right?
Right, right.
And so I think I had to kind of deprogram some of that. And I was kind of coming back to like, no, just write the music you want to write. And, if people are going to think that I'm weak for it or whatever, I just don't care anymore. But that's something I kind of had to learn the hard way and learn slowly. But I think the instrument helped me get there for sure.
Yeah, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but for me, like that version of that for me that you're describing was when I got to grad school, I felt an overwhelming need to like explain and justify every single
Yeah.
thing. Like how did I make it? Okay, I've never thought about this before. And like unlearning that has taken not
Yeah.
unlearning it, but like maybe like putting it in a more appropriate space in my brain, I'll say.
Less
Because
judgmental space
yeah,
or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel that.
Yeah. So with all this, and this is a question I ask everybody, and certainly by the time I get around to asking it to most people, I feel like, and I feel the case with you right now, like you've probably answered this question in some way, but more directly, I'm wondering, what would you describe as the primary pillars of your creative practice, like the elements, the philosophies, the style, aesthetic that forms the foundation of what you do?
You sent me this question in advance, and I've been thinking about it ever since I read it. I'm like, wow, that's a hard question. I think hmm, I think I used to think about this as a very like concrete, like these are musical elements that I use and could write them down on a piece of paper for you. And I think now I don't think about it that way. I think about it in I guess, a more philosophical kind of way. I think right now, like, and these pillars are always changing and evolving. I think for me, I am really looking to make music not by myself. That's really important now. Like, gone are the days where someone emails me, asks for a piece, I write it and I send it to them, and maybe we have a little back and forth. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. I want to not have to make a piece alone. So
Yeah.
I want to bring in I've been working a lot with this incredible multimedia artist Schwinn, Xuan, and like working with her, I think our brains are very different, but they work in a very kind of compatible way where we just kind of like fill in each other's gaps in ways. It's so exciting because, like, if I have a kernel of an idea and I don't know where it's going, I can hand it off to her and she might pull it in a completely different direction. And we end up making something that I never knew I can make. And it's because of her, right? And it's like that is really thrilling. So, and I've been enjoying. I'm working on an EP of country music, straight up country music. I'm working with producer Jeff Snyder on it, and he's had a lot of creative input, and that's really exciting. Like working with like a producer who's not just like talking audio editing, but which is often what happens in kind of the classical spaces, who
Right.
instead is like, no, like this arrangement needs this, or what if we did this, or what if we just put this in a completely different key. Like that kind of stuff is so thrilling and exciting for me, and I learn so much. It's like invigorating as opposed to exhausting, which sometimes composing can be. So I think that's one pillar, is really truly collaborating with other people, and not collaborating with in the sense that I hand music to someone else, like genuinely making the music with someone else. Another, I think, is trying to create a playful space in my music, like not treating everything as so high stakes. Like just like have fun with it. Try something, and if it doesn't work, just try something else. Because I've been so suffocated by my own perfectionism that like we talk about like make bad music, make bad art. I've been making a lot of bad art lately, and not just music. Like I make a ton of bad visual art. I've gotten really into lino cut lately, which is like linoleum carving for printmaking, which is just like so thrilling to me. So making bad art has been really liberating for me, and I've been making stuff that I never would have thought I'd be making 5 years ago. And then I guess the third, if there has, because two doesn't seem like the right number of pillars to hold something up. The third would be just like being part of the actual like sound making, like as a performer or in some capacity like that. Not just being a composer, but being a performer, being in the room, making the music with people is really important for me. I really struggle anymore to not be a part of the actual live making of the music. It just sucks. I don't know if you like it. I've met very few composers who like sitting there while their music is being played. Like
it's very awkward.
It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm always afraid like my heartbeat is gonna ruin the recording. Like it's so loud in my chest, and it's just not enjoyable. I recently wrote this piece for wind ensemble in electronics, and fortunately I had to ride the fader on the electronics during the performance, during the premiere, because if I hadn't, I would have had to, like, if I wasn't riding the fader, I would have had to just sit there. But because I was riding the fader, I felt like, I got to play along a little bit, and it made it so much more bearable from listening premiere perspective. But yeah, it's like you can't really enjoy it when you're just sitting there. I feel like it's I don't want to not enjoy my premieres. I guess I want to get in on the fun. I want to make it with people.
Yeah, so I've started making music that's like very kind of quiet and has like lots of silence in it, which feels like
I want to hear this.
It's like an inner urge that I've had. Like I'm not trying to do it for any reason other than like this is what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing from a very intuitive place. But like to speak to what you just said, I was at a performance of a piece like this. It's a solo clarinet piece, and it's like there are like moments where it's like forte and maybe I think a fortissimo, but most of the piece is under like mezzo piano. And it's like microtones, and there's like these like long notes, and it's like very subtle, and it's like I'm really thrilled with the piece, but like sitting there in this recital hall at this like new music festival kind of setting, and I'm just like hyper conscious of like, what is this music doing to everybody? Like, what am I supposed to do with my hands? Like, I like found myself just like staring at my feet, which also feels wrong. And yeah, so I like I totally get where you're coming from. It's
my God. It's like, oh my God, what do I do with my hands? It's so relatable.
Yeah.
Like, how do I breathe? Where do I look?
I just end up like, people can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just like my head's in my hand, like I'm just like avoiding all eye contact with anyone around me. Anyway.
Yeah, totally.
So maybe I need to start like finding a music that I can make that gets me a little more involved, like you do.
or you could just pretend to be doing live electronics in the back of the ensemble and just like like have your computer out,
right.
move your head a little.
Right.
Anything would be less awkward than sitting there, right?
Yeah, it's like, especially when it's like quiet. It's like, is someone's phone gonna go off? Anyway, all things going through my mind for 13 minutes of solo clarinet that I'm subjecting everyone to. But
that's gotta be a hard piece to write, though. Oh my God, like just solo.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's rewarding though, so
you're braver than I am. I don't think I would. I don't think I would have the guts to do that.
I wouldn't do it unless people commission me. So,
well, that helps for sure. That helps with bravery.
Yeah. Tyler here, and if you're enjoying this episode of Music Maker, well, just know that I've got a short form show called Micro Maker. Think of it as a distilled version of these conversations focused on powerful insights that you can listen to anytime. New episodes twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. Give it a follow. So, with this idea of like collaboration in mind, I wanted to make sure we talked about this. It's kind of, I'll characterize it as like an issue that you brought up in our kind of pre-interview communication, and that is, you mentioned that composition is so often taught as an uncollaborative process in school. And I definitely have an idea about like what you mean by this, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it, and also like how has learning to break away from that model changed how you compose? I mean, it sounds like it may be a lot.
Yeah, super a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think there's this kind of, if you ask the layperson on the street to like describe what it was probably like for Beethoven to write whatever, a piano sonata, like, is he in a room? Is he at a piano? Is he like madly scrawling things on paper at 3 in the morning, all alone and totally inspired by the genius, around him or whatever? Like that's probably how, or like if you were a cinematographer, that's how you'd set the scene, right? And I think that that idea is actually like, I'm cracking jokes about it, but I actually think that's kind of the general idea that's kind of taught in music schools, or the concept that people have, that like you are supposed to, I mean, Evan Williams has this phenomenal article he wrote, The Myth of the Composer Genius. You're
Right.
probably familiar
Yeah.
with it. That resonated so deeply with me because, there's all this pressure on the individual to be like somehow a quote unquote genius, somehow have like the best ideas that are better than anyone else's, that make phenomenal music that make us all weep. And it's like, that's not reality. Who The word genius actually has no practical meaning whatsoever. It's just a word that's used to describe like the white European successful men um, in various disciplines. And in fact, that word actively keeps folks out of the discipline because they don't think that they're intelligent enough to be a composer, or they don't see themselves in the dead white genius male composers, right? So that article is really, really liberating for me. And I think it helped me kind of realize just how much pressure I was putting on myself in order to quote unquote succeed. And this, because composition is taught as kind of this solo endeavor, and not just taught but also like within academia, like how you get tenure, how you get promoted is like, if you wrote only, I have a colleague in dance actually who only creates works collaboratively, and it's like an issue for tenure because like, how do you credit someone? Right? It's ridiculous. It shouldn't be an issue. Like, her work is phenomenal. It is like some of the most profound art I've ever experienced. But like, the, the way we evaluate quote unquote success is based off of the individual. And that's kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And in like every other musical culture, that's not how music is made. That's not how music is authored. It's not how music is credited. Right? So I think for me, yeah, it's important to have these skills as an individual, right? It's important to have craft, whatever that means for you. And I'm really cautious around that word because I think some people have really, really rigidly defined ideas of what craft is. And I think it can be many things, but it's important to develop a craft that you yourself can practice. It's important to like be able to make music on your own. I think that's valuable, but it's also really important to be able to take in other people's ideas and to co-create and to truly be teammates, because I don't think classical musicians normally know what teamwork really is. That's a hot take, but like, teamwork is not showing up on time, knowing your part and playing it well. That's
Yeah.
not teamwork. That's your solo responsibility. Like,
Right.
teamwork is like helping each other learn something they can't figure out on their own. Teamwork is showing up with dinner so that you can, cram for your music theory exam together. Teamwork is like, you know, actually co-creating something that you never could have created yourself. Like, that is really valuable, and that can look like a lot of different things as classical composers. It doesn't mean you have to like, you know co-write something with someone, but it could be something like, I'm going to take sketches to this string quartet and they're going to play through them and we're going to talk about them. And they're going to tell me what works and what doesn't work. They might have some ideas of like, oh, if you revoice this, or what if I bowed it this way, or, those kind of things. That's also collaboration. And I think a lot of times in music school, that even just that piece of like, bring your sketches to an ensemble is not a step that's included within an educational process. And that's so important for like the professional life of a composer. And you learn so much from doing that, right? So that's something I've been trying to kind of provide for my students. But that kind of, yeah, collaboration can look like a lot of different things. And it depends on the person. Every different person has a different definition of it, which is really beautiful, I think. But the way that it's been taught, I think, historically, and the kind of ideas we have around what it means to be a classical composer, a capital C composer, is incredibly uncollaborative. And if anything, just holds us back from making even better music. Hot take.
No, 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 no. Well, maybe. I don't know. I agree with you. That's why I'm saying no. It's not a hot take. But immediately flashing through my mind is the quasi trauma, not quite traumatic, but like you'll know what I mean when I say it. Of like my first and only orchestral reading session in grad school, and like the fact that it's like I had to show up with a fully formed piece of music, and it was
Just
like
hand
this
it
like
off.
end of the semester sort of like carelessness on their part, and it was just like a really terrible experience where it's like
I'm so
would have been way
sorry.
oh well, I think it's a normal experience, and but
Oh, totally.
maybe not,
Yeah.
maybe not, but a lot of people I've talked to have had similar experiences where it's like why didn't I show up in the middle of the semester when I was like trying to figure this piece out, like now
Totally.
I'm stuck with like a piece that,
Now it's stuck with
anyway.
a piece.
I am stuck with
No,
that piece, I
totally.
should say. Yeah,
No, totally. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I think for that reason in particular, like I haven't written an orchestra piece in a long time because it
sure.
just doesn't
Yeah,
feel, that space doesn't feel communal and collaborative to me. And maybe like the right scenario will come along that feels better, or allows more of a collaborative space, like a concerto or something, right? You might not be able to have that sense of collaboration with the orchestra, but you can have it with a soloist, right?
absolutely.
But that, yeah, I feel you. I haven't cracked that one yet. Come back to me in 40 years, maybe I'll have
Yeah.
an answer. Or I'll come to you in 40 years and maybe you'll have an
Yeah,
answer.
we'll all try
Yeah.
to that's all my guests. That's our whole thing, like figuring out that. Anyway. Um So another one of the questions that I ask everybody is, is there a piece of music, a film, a book, artistic artifact, really, like any kind of whatever you would consider like a piece of art that fundamentally shifted the way that you think about your own work or even changed your life in some way?
I think there are a couple. I mean, one would be this Silk Road Ensemble piece that we keep coming back to, Rose of the Winds, Osvaldo Golijov. Although we keep crediting Osvaldo Golijov, but I actually think it was Christina Pato's role within that collaboration that fundamentally changed the way I was thinking. I think uh, Donica Dennehy's piece Grau Gaspas with Irla Leonard was one of those pieces for me. Like, I was talking about a sensitivity to verticality, thinking about timbre as harmony itself. That piece, like, it opens with, so Irla Leonard is this phenomenal Irish senos singer, old style Irish singer. And the piece starts with just like a very simple kind of little flourish in his voice and a held note. And the ensemble, which I think is contemporaneous in the recording, maybe it's not, maybe it's someone else. Contemporaneous, I've seen perform this piece. It was incredible, but they like bloom out of the overtones of his voice and into the space, and like just those opening measures and the way I experience Irla's voice in the context of the resonance of this ensemble,
Yeah.
it's so visceral. It's incredible. That whole piece is incredible. Like, I make every student who ever studies with me listen to this piece. um, and they don't have to like it, I should say. Um, but like the viscerality of that piece and the way the verticality really reinforces the timbres of earless voices is incredible. So that's one. And then I mean, I have to throw some Dolly in there. There was this how I kind of came back to Dolly was I was at a concert. Some dear friends were performing at the Princeton Record Exchange, which is a lovely store with no stage. So whenever there's a performance in there, they're just like they throw the ensemble in with the like records and
Yeah.
everyone's just like crammed in the store in the aisles like trying to see the performance. It's very awkward but also lovely too because you kind of end up kind of talking to people who you wouldn't have talked to otherwise. And I remember I was standing in the corner under a sign that said cheap country. And it was like they had country and cheap country, and the cheap country is like $2 a CD. And there was this whole like pink wall next to me, and I look over and it was all Dolly Parton, and I hadn't really listened to her music much as an adult. And the whole concert, just this wall of pink was like eating a hole in the side of my face. Like I couldn't ignore it. And so by the end of the concert, I picked out the least pink Dolly CD. There was a blue one. I pulled it out. I bought it. It was her bluegrass album, The Grass is Blue, which is why the album is blue. And I popped it in my CD player in my car on the drive home. And like the first note out of her voice is just like this incredible empowered belt that lasts for like a very long time. And it was just there's just so much strength in there. And I was like, this is the opposite of who I thought Dolly was, right?
Mm.
As a kid, I saw her as like this example of femininity that felt like unempowered or felt like it was pandering to the heterosexual gaze or whatever. And I heard that and I was like, oh. I had to pull the car over and just like sit there and listen and like to hear all the strength and nuance in her voice. So I'll say that album, The Grass is Blue, has been another one for me. It's just really, I think I listened to that album and only that album for all of 2016. I want to say,
Oh, wow.
like,
Yeah.
I like broke the CD in my car. It was, that one, that was really impactful for me. Yeah.
It's the first time someone said Dolly Parton for that answer. So I appreciate that.
Okay, cool. Great. Love to switch it up.
Yeah.
I think those are pretty solid 3 to answer your question. It's been a while, I think, since I've really experienced one of those kind of pieces. So I think that means I need to listen more. I need another one of those moments in my life.
Yeah. It's also a situation where like it becomes harder to top, like
That's
the deeper you go. So
yeah, that's fair. It's like we kind of numb to it a little bit or
right.
something. Yeah. That's a fair point. But I hope one of those moments comes for me soon because they're incredible. Like they fuel you for so long. I mean, sure. What are some of yours? I'm really curious, actually.
Oh, I did a whole episode about myself where I answered
Okay,
this
great.
question, and now I'm forgetting what I said.
Well, I can definitely check out that episode.
Yeah.
But it's such a great question. You really get to know people that way.
Yeah. Oliver Nelson's coursing was one of my answers.
Oh, yeah.
One of my answers was seeing the Rite of Spring with ballet, specifically.
Ooh,
Like not the piece itself, but like this particular production of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then more recently, there's an album by a Japanese Irish artist that I am like just absolutely love the work she's doing. Her name's Ermhoy, and she has an album that like it's like you said, it's one of those albums that like dominated my whole year last year. Just like, and it's like this like kind of electronic music, but not anyway. I think that those are my answers.
Okay, I just wrote down Ermhoy. Cool.
Yeah,
okay. I have to check.
So
her out.
good.
That's awesome.
So I wanted to make sure we had time to talk about some of these other through lines in your work, queerness and activism and relate things relating to your identity and like advocating for like marginalized folks and whatnot. So, something that you said prior to us meeting was that queerness and neurodivergence are huge parts of your work, and that
Hmm.
as an adult, you've been reclaiming parts of yourself that were chipped away. So, how
Hmm.
has embracing those identities shaped not just your work, but how you also how you carry yourself as an artist today?
Well, yeah. Oof, that's a massive question. I mean, I think like I heard someone recently say your 30s are all about like reclaiming all the things that you had kind of taken away from you in your childhood, whether they just weren't cool, or you had it shamed away, or someone told you not to act that way, or not to listen to that music because it's not hip or whatever. I don't know. And I think I've very much been along that track of like kind of falling back in love with the things I knew I loved as a kid, be it like playing soccer or doing arts and crafts, or I'm definitely in my pop era and listening to a ton of pop music. And
Yeah,
that's been just like so joyous. But I think also there are other things too, like in terms of like, you know, as a kid, I didn't know I was queer, but I knew I was different. And I knew like the way I dressed wasn't considered socially acceptable, or I got laughed out of girls' bathrooms sometimes, and like or people would constantly make comments about like, oh, you'd be so pretty if you wore your hair this way, you dressed this way, you wore makeup, or you would get a boyfriend if you did these things. And so like just in my own life, that's meant kind of reclaiming, I think I think I was taught like a fear of masculinity within myself, and trying to reclaim that within just how I live my life and how I dress and how I act. And um but I think a lot of that is coming, a lot of the way I process those things is through music, because it's like one of the most kind of safely vulnerable spaces I think I have. So that's been really, selfishly valuable
sure.
for me, and empowering. Uh, and I've been trying to do those in ways, again, that are more collaborative, even if it's coming from a place of kind of my personal growth, because like those stories are not unique in the queer community. Those stories are actually like really quite common, but they look slightly different from person to person. So finding ways of inviting other people into pieces. I have this piece, I Tell You Me, for voice, any voice type, and saxophone quartet. And we've had like people of many genders and musical styles perform that piece, and many different voice types. And that's been so cool to see what different people bring to that piece. There's a lot of room for improv and variation and in that music. And I had three different queer artists remix tracks from that album, which was really fun. And like I love the remixes so much more than the originals, because it's just like so unabashedly individuals, and it's like thrilling to have been a prompt for that. So like doing that kind of processing and creating those kind of spaces through my music has been like, yeah, really, really meaningful and rewarding, and allowed me to connect with people in ways that I hadn't before, which is super exciting for me. And like neurodivergence, I think, is something that comes into play a lot within my process, like kind of understanding that, oh, like I have this like incredible ability to hyper focus, which I think a lot of composers do. Actually, I think most composers are neurodivergent, um, because you can't be a composer if you can't hyper focus. Not to gatekeep composition to only their neurodivergence, but yeah, I it's definitely something I've kind of been embracing in my process, but also more recently in the actual music, like the content of the music that I'm making. Like I'm working on my first full length opera right now, which is about kind of neurodivergence and processing trauma in hopefully ultimately what is a very in an empowered way, in a healing way. And that's kind of I think maybe a newer aspect, but queerness and neurodivergence are very much connected. I think for a lot of folks, not just myself. Those are kind of parts of a whole, right? A whole person.
So, with all that in mind, I mean, you've said that activism through text feels like a central through line in your work,
Hmm.
even if the listener doesn't always directly hear the text itself. Um,
Hmm.
I thought that was really interesting. I mean, how do you think about using text as both like a structural and an emotional part of your music?
Yeah, I mean, not to make everything about Dolly Parton, but like the ultimate storyteller.
Sure.
I, I, you know, her ability to tell stories is something that really, I think, kind of invites everyone in, right? Like everyone loves a good story, right? Regardless of musical tastes or whatever. So I love text for that. I love text for the timbral elements of the text, so to bring it back kind of to spectralism, like, the way different vowels shapes have literally different like spectral makeups. Different timbres can kind of certain vowels can pierce through an ensemble while other ones can be like very delicate or dark. I that kind of obsessive nature, or should I say, I approach text with like an obsessive nature of the sounds themselves as a vocalist, like it's and how they feel in my body and how they feel in this space. But then also I've had some moments in my music where the text is not spoken aloud, or I ask, someone on the vibraphone to perform on two notes, a sentence or two, as a way of having them create a rhythm that feels cohesive without being measured. I've found that to be, again, kind of maybe more from the obsessive quality of the text, of the sound of the text itself. It's been really fun to experiment with having the performer of an instrument have that as a prompt. And you achieve something that you couldn't get with like conventional notation. I remember Raven Chacon was here at CU Boulder this past year, and he was talking about his piece, the piece that won the Pulitzer. Was it called a Voiceless Mass? Yeah, yeah. And there's a moment in there where a percussionist is like performing text on like a snare, I think, that is completely inaudible to
Mm,
everyone there. And like, but the amount of intention that goes into doing something like that, like, I would watch someone do something totally inaudible with like all the intention in the world behind it. Like, that's incredible. So I need to spend some more time thinking about that specific moment that Raven brought up, because I found that to be very profound. But I'm really interested in kind of those ways of escaping kind of conventional notation and escaping the time grid of notation. I find that to be really limiting. So text is a nice way of creating structure in time without an actual grid of measures around it, which I've enjoyed
yeah.
experimenting with. Yeah.
So I'm very interested in like the way you work with text and the stories that you tell in your music. I mean, it's the idea of like using text that no one hears at all is like really fascinating. But
Mm.
of course, you've written and you've sung your own music in a lot of cases that with text that you've written or adapted in some way. And one of the things that I love in your body of work is how you've created these feminist rager-lullabies, which is also fun to say, by the way. Uh, and I'm really interested in digging in more to this aspect of your music. I mean, what originally drew you to lullabies as a space to reclaim and rewrite some of these kind of stories?
Yeah, I mean, I I've always kind of loved lullabies, but I couldn't really tell you why, other than like, who doesn't love having someone sing you a lullaby? But I came across a bit of writing by a musicologist named Andrew Pettit, who said that lullabies are one of the only truly safe performance spaces that women have. So, like, you can say things in a lullaby, you can sing things in a lullaby that would not be safe to share in a more public setting, because you're singing to a small child who might not even understand language yet, who, and it's just you and the audience of the child. And this text is really, like, if you look at lullaby texts from all over the world, all over time, they're very dark,
Yeah.
oftentimes incredibly some of the darkest writing in humanity, because it's like society kind of forbids us from having these dark thoughts or confronting these really dark aspects of life, fear of death, fear of, so many different things. And when you're singing a lullaby to a child, like, that musical performance space is for just the two of you, right? And so I love this idea of, like, the I think Andrew Pettit said, you can say the unsayable and sing the unsung. And I was like, that's it. That's what I need. That's what I need to do. Because, like, the stuff that I have to say is stuff that I've been told throughout my life I'm not supposed to say, or attitudes I'm not supposed to have, or anger I'm not supposed to express as a woman, and a lot of these lullabies did come from a place of, like, extreme anger. And I think at this point in my, that was like, those came from my 20s, and at this point in my 30s, I think I'm a little less writing from a place of anger. But I think part of that is because I was able to get so much out of it, out of me, through my
Yeah,
music.
totally.
To finally get to, like, rage out is really, really satisfying. And to do so in a way that is, like, publicly acceptable is also really great. um and I should also say, in a time where it was finally acceptable. Like, I started really digging into these songs in, like, 2017, around the time of the Me Too movement. And if I had been making these songs even a year earlier, I think I would have gotten some really serious pushback, and some not been kind of embraced for making angry music about the patriarchy. But because the Me Too movement have just reared its head, people are like, "Oh yeah, we're there with you,
Yeah,
right?
we need this.
Yeah, now's the time." So that was a really cathartic time in my life, to be able to do that through music, and to be able to do it through kind of a genre, I think, that is really associated with women, of lullabies. And this idea of, like, being nurturing and mothering is, like, something that's always put on women, and to have that be allowed to be an angry space, in a space that is powerful, I think, was important to me, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting into my final set of questions I ask everybody, and it's always fun to kind of see how people answer them in different ways, or not different ways. A lot of the same answers come up sometimes. And I'll kind of kick things off with, what do you think you'd be doing artistically or otherwise if it weren't composing, or if, like, music wasn't part of the equation?
Hmm. Um, I think it would be an artist, probably a visual artist. That, or I would have tried to be an athlete or something. I think those things, again, things that I just loved as a kid and kind of had taken away from me in adulthood, and I'm trying to reclaim them right now. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What are you trying to get better at in your creative practice right now?
Not judging myself.
Yeah.
Having fun. Yeah, I think having fun. That's really important. I'm really bad at it, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, I just spoke with a composer earlier this week, Michael Frazier, who that was like his whole thing is like, I don't think I had fun composing until after I graduated college, and it's like,
Yeah.
that soon, like that early. It's like I'm still
Yeah,
trying
good work.
to, yeah. So I totally
He's
get where you're
faster than we are, apparently.
yeah, great composer. But yeah, I was like, oh man, I need to get on top of this. Uh, is there a tool in your creative practice that you think everyone should know about, and that anybody could use? I mean, this could be a physical object, it could be software, a process, whatever a tool means to you.
I'm big into drawing a piece out. So like as soon as I get just knee deep into a piece, I draw out the whole thing, like visualize it. There's this I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan. His book Slaughterhouse-Five used to be like required reading for all high schoolers, and now I'm realizing none of my students even know who Kurt Vonnegut is. But there's in Slaughterhouse-Five, there's this like alien species, the Tralfamadorians, and they see time the way we see the Rocky Mountains, for instance. Like they're completely unstuck in time. And I thought, wow, that's what I need.
Yeah,
And so I try to sketch out time, the time of my piece, whatever the duration is of the piece. I try to sketch it out so I can look at it like a landscape and kind of calibrate and recalibrate as I'm working on the piece. I get really back to arts and crafts. I get like very colorful and involved with it. Like visual colors representing timbre and the y-axis representing drama, let's say, and I can draw textures in there and things like that. It's
yeah,
really really valuable for pacing. So, and I really recommend that everyone try it, because everyone's going to create a visual thing that looks completely different, right? We're going to have our own visual styles that correspond with our musical styles. So I think Missy Mazzoli like paints murals as she's working on pieces, which is super cool. So I find that very liberating. I recommend giving it a shot if people haven't.
yeah. I anytime anyone brings this up, I join the chorus, and I'm like, I do that too.
Nice.
But notably, this is the first time I've ever like connected it to the aliens in Slaughterhouse-Five, which is a book
Okay.
I love but haven't read since high school. So maybe that means it's time
There you
to
go.
read, because you're right. I mean, it's like that's the problem with composing, is like it's hard to get stuck, or it's really easy to get stuck in time.
Mhm.
And like,
Mhm.
have to problem solve your way out of it. And
Yeah, and I just forget what I've already written. So, like, to be able to just
yeah,
look at one piece of paper and see the whole thing rather than having to like scroll through 40 pages of score,
yeah,
is also just really nice. Convenient, should I say.
yeah, for sure. My final question: what is something you've never had the chance to say about your work, but you've always wanted to share?
I don't know how to answer this question. Oh my god. This is a stumper. I guess I can just say maybe I can answer a slightly different question, which is like um something I've always wanted within my work but haven't been able to do. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah,
Sure.
you can do that.
Because I don't really have anything valuable to say about my music. But something that I'm trying I try really hard to do within my music, I guess. Maybe this does answer your question. Wow, I just talked in a huge circle. I think that and part of it is because of my proximity to academia, but there's not enough discussion, I think, around like the actual why of the music making. I think that's really important for composers to explore, not necessarily answer, but explore. For me, the why all comes down to like emotional vulnerability, like being as raw and honest and taking your heart and putting it out at the end of a 10-foot pole
Yeah,
and offering it to the audience. Like for me, that is my goal with every single piece. And I I think that like oftentimes in academia, we don't actually, because we don't have academic ways of speaking about emotion, we just don't talk about it. And I think for me, I just want to talk about it more. I want to hear what other people's experiences are with that kind of vulnerability. All the pieces that I mentioned, I think that were impactful for me had that element to it as well. that kind of emotional rawness, or that lack of fear of just being kind of as authentically yourself, not just in terms of your identity, but like literally in terms of like the very core of your being, and sharing those things that we normally don't share with other people. I think that there's something really, visceral about that for me. That's the point of art for me. And I guess I wish we were better at talking about it in academia. I don't have an answer, which maybe I should get on that as someone in academia. But I think that's something that's increasingly a question, or something that I'm turning as a question and pointing outward to other people these days, wanting to learn more about people's why, and what makes them tick, what makes their art worthwhile for them.
Beautiful way to end this conversation.
Oh,
Annika, thanks so much for your time. I've loved every second of talking with you, and we'll have to do it again sometime. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited to go check out, was it Ermhoy? Oh my God. Yes.
Ermhoy. Yeah.
If you have any other recs, let me know, because as I said, I'm searching for my next, I need to listen more. I'm in my listening era. Let's say that.
Yeah.
My next radical listening experience. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's joy speaking with you too, Tyler.
Many thanks to Annika for joining me for this episode of Music Maker. And I just loved hearing her talk about finding freedom through collaboration, and about what it means to write from a place of radical authenticity. Very, very inspiring stuff. You can learn more about Annika and her music on our website. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. I'm Tyler Kline. Thank you, as always, for joining me for this episode of Music Maker. The show is produced by Loose Leaf Transmissions, made for all ears. You can explore more episodes and find ways to support the work at looseleaftransmissions.com. Thanks again for listening. Take care of yourself, and until next time, bye for now.